Hello, and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Tim Brooks, Managing Director with Worldwide Technology, and we are partnering with CDO Magazine, MIT CDO IQ, and the International Society of Chief Data Officers in a series of interviews. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Satyam Priyadarshy, Senior Fellow and Chief Data Scientist at Halliburton. Welcome, Dr. Priyadarshy.
Thank you, Tim, for inviting me to speak with you.
It's great to meet you, and I believe that we are speaking to you today from somewhere in a location in Virginia. Halliburton, as everyone knows, is a Houston-based company, but we're all working from home these days, right?
Absolutely. So I'm speaking from Northern Virginia.
Excellent. So first question I'd like to ask someone in your role, and you've been doing this a while and you've accomplished a lot. How do you explain what you do to people that aren't in our industry? How do you tell them, here's what I do?
Yes, I'll explain that in two ways. One is I tell people that what I'm trying to do now is actually trying to transform a complex industry. And especially since I'm in oil and gas industry, I say we're trying to transform oil and gas industry. And one of the reasons is I'm actually a child of oil and gas industry. I grew up in India, in India's oil company called ONGC. So I know enough to be dangerous to know what it means. But then I got a chance to come and work here. And I certainly know that what are inefficiencies and etc. So I say that we're trying to transform an industry, not a company. Because company transformation is a different thing than actually industry. And why is it important? Because we live in this era called energy transition era. And in that, oil and gas industry really needs to transform now to be resilient and sustainable.
Totally. I understand that transformation. So I guess that leads me to a question. What's changed about your mission and about your role over the last 5 or 10 years, now that we're in this transitional energy period?
Yeah, so very interesting. My background actually is I did my PhD in something called artificial photosynthesis a long time ago when I was very young. But now I see, where the world is going, and we're talking about energy transition, right? So that talking about solar cells, even where their efficiency is low. But at the same time, there is push on the fossil fuel, and the industry has to reduce the carbon footprint. But if you look at it, industry has been very rich in many sense, but they haven't actually exploited the wealth of information that is sitting in the data that they have collected. And whatever good or bad reasons would have been that they didn't collect that, did not create that value. But I would say I've been here in the industry for 8 years. And in 8 years, I can tell you the first 2 years were very painful, because every time I met the leaders in the industry, and they would say, you are in a wrong industry to come and talk about data. We are a big data organization. We know how to take care of it. Who wants to do data science or big data and things like that? And I said, how is that possible? You could not have exploited everything. And I knew that because from a computational science perspective, that's where my PhD was, is a big field. And to leverage computational chemistry or computational science is a big approach, right? And so they did it for reservoir simulation, but after that, they didn't do for anything else.
Right.
And then I wrote an article, I think 2015, on data democratization. It was an experience of publishing a 500-word article that has to go through so many reviews.
Right.
But today, after 8 years, it doesn't matter which organization of this industry you talk, SPE, SEG, APG, AAPG, all right, EAGE, pretty much every organization that supports the industry talks about data, digitalization, digital transformation. So for me, that has been a massive change from 2015 to 2021.
Interesting. As part of that shift, have you seen, I guess I'd put it this way, in the story of data and reporting and extracting information from data, we moved from, let's say, 20, maybe 30 years ago, from reporting, right, which I call a rear view mirror on your operations, to more predictive analytics, which would help humans make better decisions about the next thing to do, scenario planning, costs, risks, projections, things like that. Is the energy industry taking advantage of that? Are they all in on predictive and then moving into machine learning and things like that?
Yeah, so I think certainly. So one of the things, a misnomer about the oil and gas industry was that they were behind in some sense. But if you really seriously look at it, they have actually used many of the algorithms of artificial intelligence even 20, 30 years ago. But at that time, computational resources didn't exist. Access to data did not exist. So they did experimental aspect of it very well. They knew what the value could be. But I would say in last 5 years, since 2016, as the cloud computing paradigm became a reality, scalability of CPU, scalability of data access, connectivity of data became easier. The applications that are built using algorithms have suddenly skyrocketed. We ourselves have built so many in the early stages for internal use. And then we actually started building that for our partners. Unlike the marketing domain or the retail or e-commerce or CPG, where I have done work in the past before coming to this industry, the challenges are very different in this industry. We have to augment them. You can't ignore the physics. You can't ignore the geology. You can't ignore engineering and say I will only do data driven, because if you are in a web industry, you only have data, nothing else, right? But here you have the physics and the geology and the engineering aspect to it. So you do a combination of first principles and data driven, and that is the most valuable. And so moving to predictive becomes easier and more valuable.